Democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others that have been tried. Winston Churchill said this in 1947, but even he didn't suspect how deeply this problem is rooted in our biology. We live in an era where everyone can vote, but few understand what they're actually voting for. Why do the most educated candidates lose to the loudest ones? Why does appearance matter more than experience? Why do 3 minutes on stage determine a country's fate for the next 4 years? In 2017, neuroscientists at the University of California conducted an experiment that should terrify every voter. They collected photographs of politicians from municipal elections in small Brazilian towns. Participants saw these faces for 200 milliseconds, less than 1/3 of a second. No names, no platforms, no context, just a brief flash of an image on screen. Then one question changed everything we knew about democratic choice. Which of these people would you trust to run your city? The results shocked even the researchers themselves. Participants predicted the winners of real elections in 64% of cases. They had never heard of these towns. They didn't know the language the candidates spoke. They understood nothing about political programs. 200 milliseconds was enough for our brains to make a decision that matched the choice of thousands of real voters. Facial structure defeated political experience. Symmetry of features proved stronger than economic arguments. But the most frightening study was conducted by Swiss psychologists in 2009. They invited children aged 5 to 13 for a simple game. Pairs of adult faces appeared on screen. The task sounded innocent. If you were sailing on a ship, which one would you choose as captain? The children didn't know these were politicians. Nobody told them this was an election prediction test. They just picked faces that seemed more reliable to them. Children predicted the results of French parliamentary elections with accuracy that was statistically identical to adults. 5-year-old kids who barely know how to read chose future members of parliament with the same efficiency as educated adult voters. Think about that for a moment. We determine who will control armies' budgets, education, healthcare, using the same mechanism as a child choosing a friend on a playground. Our choice is based not on understanding, but on instinct that formed millions of years ago. This isn't a modern mistake. A Greek thinker named Plato described this exact mechanism in the 4th century BCE. He watched the world's first democracy destroy itself because people chose not the wisest but the most confident. He observed how eloquent frauds defeated wise experts. He recorded the precise algorithm of how democracy breeds incompetence. 24 centuries later, we're still playing by the same rules and losing the same battles. Plato wasn't an elitist who despised common people. He lived through the horror of democratic collapse on his own skin. In 399 before Common Era, Athenian democracy executed his teacher Socrates, a philosopher whose only crime was asking uncomfortable questions, who forced the powerful to admit their own ignorance. Plato watched as the mob voted for the death of the wisest person in the city because he ruined the illusion of competence. He grew up during the Peloponnesian War that lasted 27 years and destroyed Athens. The greatest catastrophe came from the Sicilian expedition. 43,000 Athenian soldiers died in an absolutely senseless military adventure. The expedition was promoted by charismatic aristocrat Alcibiades, who promised easy victory, enormous loot, quick return home. He spoke at popular assemblies so convincingly that even experienced strategists voted for the suicidal plan. Beautiful speech defeated military logic. Confidence eclipsed strategic thinking. After these tragedies, Plato wrote a warning we've been ignoring for 2,400 years. Let's talk about why our brains are wired to choose catastrophe, why the system rewards the worst leaders, why we're doomed to repeat Athens's mistakes. Plato described a situation that repeats in every election in every country for the last 2,000 years. A wealthy merchant owns a large ship, but has never held the wheel himself. The crew argues about who has the right to steer the vessel during a dangerous journey across the ocean. One sailor steps forward. He's never navigated beyond coastal waters, but that's exactly what makes him confident. He doesn't know enough about navigation to realize his own incompetence. His confidence is born not from experience, but from never encountering complexity. This sailor tells the crew exactly what they want to hear. The sea will be calm, the voyage quick, everyone will get rich without effort. He believes this not because it's true, but because he's never faced the real dangers of open ocean. He's not lying deliberately. He genuinely doesn't understand what he doesn't know. His ignorance creates an illusion of simplicity where complexity actually reigns. Nearby stands an experienced navigator. He's spent 20 years studying stars' currents, storm seasons. He tries to explain that dangerous waters lie ahead, that careful preparation is needed, backup plans, understanding of risks. But he sounds uncertain precisely because he understands all the complexity of navigation. He talks about potential problems, about options, about things that could go wrong. His caution is born from knowledge, not fear. The crew votes. They choose the confident amateur over the cautious expert because confidence inspires trust more than competence. They confuse certainty with wisdom. A beautiful speech seems more important to them than real skills. The ship sinks, not because of a storm, but because nobody on board knows how to read the stars. For Plato, this wasn't an abstract metaphor. This was Athens. The ship symbolized the state. The crew was the voters. He watched them choose eloquent ignoramuses over silent sages until the whole system collapsed under the weight of accumulated mistakes. We still repeat this pattern. September 1960. The first televised debate in American political history, Richard Nixon versus John Kennedy. Radio listeners thought Nixon won, but television viewers saw something different. Nixon looked pale, sweaty, uncomfortable. Kennedy was tanned, rested, photogenic. He looked presidential even when silent. People who listened to the debate on radio evaluated arguments and logic. They gave victory to Nixon. Television viewers evaluated appearance and charisma. They chose Kennedy as winner of the same debate. Same words, same arguments, different media, opposite conclusions. Appearance changed the perception of reality. Face proved stronger than facts. Or take Brexit in 2016. The campaign to leave the European Union had 3 words painted on buses. Take back control. The campaign to remain had economists' detailed reports on trade consequences, complex analyses of economic integration, multi-page studies. The simple story defeated the complex truth. Voters admitted later they didn't fully understand the economic implications, but the phrase, "take back control," triggered the right emotions. This pattern isn't unique to one country or ideology. From Italy to the Philippines, from Britain to Brazil and India, the same dynamic. Charismatic simplicity defeats knowledgeable complexity every single time. The question Plato forces us to acknowledge sounds brutal. Why is running a country the only profession that requires 0 qualifications? We demand that doctors study for 12 years before they touch a patient. Pilots must log thousands of hours before commercial flights. Licenses are required to cut hair, drive cars, sell real estate, but to run a state make decisions affecting millions of lives. Just be popular enough to win a vote. No experience, no competency test, no demonstration of real knowledge. Plato had a special word for people who thrive in democratic systems: sophists, masters of persuasion who cared more about winning arguments than finding truth. They could argue any side of any position with equal passion if it brought power, money, or influence. Their danger lay not in stupidity, but in something more terrifying. Sophists weren't fools. Many possessed intellectual abilities, even brilliance in certain spheres. But when it came to governing the state, understanding economics, ethics, justice, long-term consequences of policy, they operated completely outside their expertise. Yet their mastery of rhetoric created an illusion of qualification. They knew how to sound wise without being wise, how to project authority without possessing knowledge, how to appear expert while remaining ignorant. For Plato, this was the most dangerous combination: intelligence without wisdom, confidence without competence, persuasive skill without genuine expertise. These people didn't know what they didn't know. They mastered the appearance of knowledge without acquiring real understanding, could convince crowds they understood economics without understanding economics, projected expertise in governance while being catastrophically ignorant of how states actually function. Think what this means for democracy. The system doesn't select people who understand governance. It selects those who can win popularity contests. And winning a popularity contest requires a completely different skill set than running a country. What skills do democratic elections reward? Public speaking, charisma, the ability to simplify complex issues into memorable slogans, looking good on camera, projecting confidence, making people feel good. These are legitimate skills, just not the ones needed for effective governance. The skills necessary for governing a state look different: understanding economic systems, navigating complex foreign policy, managing enormous bureaucracies, making difficult compromises between competing values, acknowledging uncertainty, accepting that some problems have no good solutions, only less bad options. Say anything like that during a campaign, and you lose to someone promising simple fixes. Democracy creates a systematic mismatch. It elevates people brilliant at campaigning and often incompetent at governing, not because they're generally stupid, but because they spent their lives developing the wrong expertise. Most remarkable is that Plato identified the exact same pattern 2,400 years before psychologists gave it a name: the Dunning-Kruger effect. Psychologists David Dunning and Justin Kruger found that people with the least expertise in a certain field often display the greatest confidence. The reason is simple: they lack the knowledge to recognize how much they don't know. That's exactly what Plato said about sophists. They were confident because they never studied deeply enough to encounter real complexity. A true philosopher who spent years studying governance, ethics, economics would be humble because they understood how intricate these systems are. But the sophist never went deep enough to discover his own ignorance. So he radiates certainty, has simple answers because he never understood the complicated questions. In democracy, such certainty wins elections. Plato called this the difference between doxa and episteme. Opinion versus knowledge. Episteme is hard-won understanding gained through years of rigorous study. It's knowing how systems actually work, recognizing unintended consequences, understanding trade-offs. It's the expertise that makes you competent at governance. Doxa is surface-level thinking, gut feelings, confident assertions based on limited understanding. It's when we confuse our feelings about something with knowledge about something. It's being certain while being wrong. Democracy runs on doxa, not episteme. Elections reward doxa. Campaigns are built on doxa. Doxa always beats episteme because it's easier, faster, and more emotionally satisfying. The candidate with episteme will say, "This problem is complicated. Here are 3 possible approaches, each with significant trade-offs. I'll need to consult experts and adjust based on results." The candidate with doxa will say, "Only I can fix this. The solution is simple, trust me." Guess who wins? The confident amateur every time. Not despite lacking expertise, but because lacking expertise lets them project simple certainty. Here's the darkest part of Plato's warning. Democracy doesn't just reward the wrong people. It eventually destroys itself because of them. In the dialogue Republic, Plato described democracy not as the endpoint of political evolution, but as an unstable stage that collapses under its own contradictions. The pattern looks like this. Democracy's freedom turns into chaos. Sophists compete by making bigger promises and simpler solutions. Chaos becomes unbearable. People feel desperation and need for order. A strong man appears. The ultimate sophist promising to fix everything. The exhausted population voluntarily hands over power. Democracy dies with applause. Look at Rome. By the 1st century BCP, the Roman Republic was falling apart. Political gridlock, violent factionalism, economic inequality spiraling out of control. The Senate couldn't agree on anything. Nothing worked. People were desperate. Enter Julius Caesar. Charismatic general. Brilliant military commander. Champion of the people against the corrupt senatorial elite. Was he stupid? Absolutely not. Was he qualified to govern in military matters? Yes. In understanding Republican institutions' economics, long-term political stability, he had no expertise. More dangerously, he didn't think he needed it. Had confidence and popular support. That was enough. He crossed the Rubicon with his army, an act of treason. The people cheered. The Senate killed him to save the Republic. The people rioted. They didn't want the Republic back. They wanted Caesar. His adopted son Augustus learned the lesson. Keep the appearance of republican institutions while holding all real power. The Senate still met. Elections still happened. Augustus controlled everything. The Roman people accepted it gratefully because, after decades of chaos, at least there was order. The Republic died not with rebellion, but with applause. Why does this keep happening? Because at every stage, democracy's selection process filters for exactly the wrong qualities. Who decides to run for office? Often people who crave power and attention. Who succeeds? Those willing to say whatever it takes to win. Who makes it to the top? People who mastered persuasion without developing governance expertise. The real experts can't compete. They won't promise what they can't deliver. Won't pretend to have simple answers. Won't exploit people's fears so they lose. The confident amateurs win until those amateurs destroy the very system that elevated them. What was Plato's answer? Stop letting people choose who don't understand governance. His ideal system philosopher king sounds elitist because it truly is elitism. He wanted leaders who spent decades studying philosophy, ethics, mathematics, governance, people who understood the difference between knowledge and opinion, people who loved wisdom more than power. Critically selected through rigorous testing and education, not popular vote. Before you dismiss this as undemocratic elitism, understand his logic. It's not that most people are stupid. It's that most of us are understandably ignorant about the specifics of governance. And why wouldn't we be? We're busy with our actual jobs and lives. Don't have time to become experts in economics, foreign policy, constitutional law. But democracy asks us to make incredibly complex decisions anyway. It's like asking someone who never studied medicine to perform surgery. We're not incapable. We're just being asked to do something we're not trained for. When a system asks people to make decisions without giving them necessary expertise, bad outcomes follow. We're not victims of democracy's flaws. We're participants. Every time we vote for the candidate who makes us feel good, rather than the one who's demonstrably more qualified, we feed the cycle. Every time we share outrage headlines without reading substance, we reward simplification over truth. The trap is that recognizing these patterns doesn't automatically fix them. Understanding our biases doesn't eliminate them. Knowing how we're being manipulated doesn't stop the manipulation from working. Here's what really makes Plato's critique sting after 24 centuries. We're still doing it, still elevating confident amateurs over humble experts. The system still rewards this mismatch. We get the leaders we choose. Not because we're bad people, but because we're human. Our brains evolved for survival in small tribes, not for evaluating complex policy proposals. Those ancient instincts trust the confident face, follow the charismatic voice, prefer the simple story served us well for hundreds of thousands of years. They're catastrophically mismatched to choosing leaders in modern democracies. Plato watched this pattern destroy Athens 24 centuries ago. We're watching similar patterns play out globally today. The uncomfortable question is whether we're capable of anything different. Can we actually choose episteme over doxoknowledge over confident ignorance, expertise over charisma? Or are we trapped in a system that makes intelligent people choose poorly because our brains evolved for a completely different world? We are the crew on Plato's ship of fools. The same argument is happening on deck right now. The confident amateurs promise easy voyages. The experienced navigators warn of complexity. We keep choosing the amateurs not because we're stupid, but because the system makes this choice feel rational.